I'm YeongBeomChoi. From now on, I'll give a presentation about disaster occurrence and legal liability. In the event of an emergency such as a disaster, civil servant, volunteers, health professional, and the non-profit government, organization worry about the potential liability for their action in an emergency. Thus, the federal and the state government are providing some protection these concerns. Here, we will look at the type of liability that may arise in emergency and explain the protection. First, I'll explain the kind of liability in an emergency. First, tort liability. Civil liability based on tort is the most common occurrence of liability in emergency response. Torts are acted by an individual or group that cause harm to another person or property intentionally or unintentionally. Intentional tort occur when an actor tries to harm or a person or property with the intention of causing harm. It includes assault, theft, emotional distress, fraud, and trespassing. Unintentional tort occurs when an actor does not intend to harm another person or property due to his actions. A typical unintentional tort is negligence. This is the most common legal liability in emergencies such as a disaster. Theory of occurrence of negligence are as follows. First, everyone has a general obligation to act in a rational manner at all times. Second, there is an unreasonable act or failure to act. Third, this unreasonable act or failure to act causes damage to people or property. Fourth, this creates legal liability. The type of activities that can lead to negligence are as follows. Failure to compliance with existing plans. Executive level decision making for poor planning. And lack of commanding officers' wisdom. Second, it is a liability for violating law and regulation. And there are many potential areas that can deliberately or inadvertently violate state and federal statutory requirements in emergency response scenarios such as disaster. Thus, it is a liability for the violation of the Constitution. Fourth, criminal liability. As civil liability, individuals and organizations can be held accountable for criminal penalties in emergency response activities. The following is the protection of liability in the event of a disaster. Here, we would like to discuss the liability of tort, which is the most problematic in disaster situation. First, in the case of an intentional tort, the victim agrees expressly or implicitly. In addition, there is a public necessity that is taken to avoid more harm to individual or to the community. In both cases, protection against intentional tort is possible. The following are protection against negligence. There are several potential defenses against negligence. First, contributory and comparative negligence. This is when the victim's action contributes to the damage. It acts on complete defense to negligence, such as or dependents will not be found liable for his or her actions because the victim's actions are added to the harm. Second, assumption of risk. Assumption of risk was traditionally viewed as a complete bar to recovery if the victim understood the risk. Third, immunity. Most state disaster or emergency act contains more specific protection for government officials engaged in critical decision-making procedure in emergency. Some states have established a broad set of immunities to protect not only the individual involved in the decision-making process, but also the various participants who act in an emergency response. In the case of federal government, two immunity privileges may apply: government function and discretionary power. Government's function protects negligence due to inherent government activities such as tax collection and law enforcement in emergency situations. Discretionary power is included in the Federal Tort Claim Act. According to the Supreme Court of USA, it is not included in the discretionary power as follows. First, the mandatory action of a government under federal statute. Second, action that based on existing policy, regulation, or procedural policy guideline. The issue of legal responsibility in a disaster situation have two conflict issues. First, there is a concern that civil servant volunteers will not conduct the best rescue activity because of the potential liability of their action in a disaster situation. When the sinking of Seoul occurred in South Korea, the Marine police rescue officer was not actively rescuing the passenger because he was concerned about the responsibility of the rescuers for personal injury. Second, in the event of a disaster, public official volunteer can abuse illegal activity due to exemption from liability such as negligence. When MERS occurred in South Korea, there was a case where the authority had excessive restriction on the freedom of movement of hospital workers and patient families due to the blocking of epidemics. My conclusion of this issue is as follows. First, it is necessary to actively utilize the liability exemption to encourage active rescue activity in a disaster situation. Second, clarify requirement for exemption from liability. In this way, the emergency officer who is in charge of an emergency response can predict the exempted actions, and it prevents them to abusing it. So far, I have explained the liability and the protection of those involved in relief activities in an emergency. Thank you.